Hello and welcome to the Surgical Spirit podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Haidar Al-hakim, the Third Eye Doctor. Pull up a chair and get ready for some candid and uncompromising discussion with experts, innovators, agitators, and influential people from every corner of health and well-being. From inside the hospital to at home in the kitchen, we're leaving no stone unturned in our quest to uncover the secrets of healthier, happier, more successful, and less stressful lives. Thank you so much for joining us, and without further ado, let's meet this episode's guest.
Hello, Vafa. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Hello, Haidar. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. It's my day off today, so I'm really happy that I don't have to see patients. I mean, it's not that I don't like seeing patients. I don't know. I think it's having that time to sort of decide how you want to spend it, which is nice. But it gets boring sometimes. And I'm sure you'll give me a lecture of why is it getting boring? This shouldn't be happening.
Life shouldn't be boring. There's far too much to do for life to be boring.
So tell me about, because you came here to the UK at the age of 16.
I did.
What was life before the UK?
Oh, life before the UK was my norm. It was living in Shiraz, which is the city of wine and roses in Iran. I was born and bred there, went to school there, 2 years of high school. So 2 years from finishing when my parents finally decided that they needed to immigrate so that they could give myself and my sister a better life. So life in Iran, pre-revolution. So I was 7 at the time of the Islamic Revolution. So pre-revolution life was very different from post-revolution life. And that kind of almost changed very quickly, you know. I want to say overnight, but these things don't happen overnight. They happen gradually. But, you know, it just kind of felt like it was an overnight change because we had a very, very different style of life. And then we very quickly learned that all that certainty, all that normality had changed, and we kind of soon needed to get used to a different kind of life altogether, which then became normal.
Yeah. And I presume your parents thought that this wasn't compatible with what they wanted, because it's quite a big upheaval, you know, taking the family away from such a,
Absolutely.
you know, such a essentially a long heritage and. You know, a culture that they've been used to for such a long time.
Absolutely. So my dad went to Germany when he was in his early 20s to study. So he spent the majority of his youth there, about 10, 12 years of his youth was spent there, and also in Switzerland working after he graduated in Germany. Yeah. And he went back to serve his country with the qualifications that he had, and then he had a really good job and he was really successful in the job that he had. So was mom was educated, she worked. They were both highly regarded professionals. They had built an 18-year life together, really lovely home that was mortgage free. They had their, you know, support network there, and they did their annual kind of European trips before the revolution. And I remember mom was really keen to actually move abroad because it was very pretty. You know, we went to places like Luxembourg and kind of, you know, you walk around and it's just utterly beautiful. Then you go to kind of, you know, Germany, you walk around in Stuttgart and it's just gorgeous, you know. And mom always wanted a big garden and wanted a life like that. And she'd say to dad, let's sell the house in Shiraz. We can buy like 4 properties here and we can have a really lovely home. And dad would say, no, you don't know what it's like to live abroad. You know, it's really lonely. You don't have your family and friends around you. It's just very different. We don't belong here. And yet it was dad who then in the end decided, you know, enough is enough and we kind of need to go. So they had the opportunity of moving to the West somewhere where they could have a prosperous life way before the revolution even, but they chose not to because they wanted to kind of, you know, have that community that they were part of and their jobs, they loved their jobs. And then unfortunately they just had to do it. And as you say, the upheaval was huge then because it was done just after the war finished, the Iran-Iraq war. So we migrated just after. And as they were deciding to migrate and kind of, converting the real to pounds and how much they could bring out so that they could invest and buy houses and do this and that and the other, by the time that dream was realized, because the war had finished, inflation hit Iran, and literally the value of their money dropped. Haidar, if I'm being honest, I can see a lot of what went on back then now, as we're experiencing life, that I'm just waiting for inflation to hit us. Huge inflation. I think it already has. I'm really, really aware of it. So this COVID situation we're just coming out of is going to hit us hard economically. And so I see parallels definitely between what my parents went through in their midlife as they were leaving, and as I am now in my midlife, kind of witnessing everything. So I feel like I've been there. It's like a sense of deja vu.
Yeah. And going back to the war, what was that like? Living in Iran during the Iran-Iraq war.
Not nice. We were in Shiraz, and Shiraz wasn't the center that was being attacked a lot. However, a lot of the refugees from the southern Iran, Abadan and Ahvaz, came to Shiraz actually. So we could see firsthand what death and devastation was like for people. So that changed the environment of Shiraz quite a lot actually after the refugees came. And also we did witness a little bit of it during our New Year for some bizarre reason. At around kind of March time, when Nowruz is, there would always be a little bit of a tension, and then we'd have a few missiles dropped on us, and the war shelter that was built in the playground of my high school was already a place of safety for us. Anytime the sirens came, we would go and hide there. And this particular day, the headmistress came to the classroom when we were in the middle of math, when the sirens were raised. She invited us to leave the school very quickly. We did. And lo and behold, that day, the war shelter was actually annihilated, this Scud missile. So
Wow.
it was kind of, we were that close to death at any particular moment in time. And I don't even think I realized it back then. It's now that I kind of tell this story and people have this reaction of, wow, that must have been really scary. I'm like, yeah, it must have been scary. But you know what it's like, you're very well aware of how we build kind of coping mechanisms around these scary situations and just kind of even forget about them. So it's something that's not even front of mind for me. So that became our norm, and this is again the similarities that I see between then and now, that this kind of limited life that we lived during the COVID time became the norm for many. Many are actually living it still now, even though the world has opened up quite a lot. There are many, and I know a friend I met a couple of days ago said, I'm still not going out a lot because of COVID, and like, the world's open, you can come out, you're allowed. So people very quickly get used to the norm that's imposed on them, if you like,
Yeah. And I mean, I remember I was in Iran at the time in '84. And the city I was in was, if I remember, Urumia, and it was being bombarded by the Iraqi Air Force, and bombs going off, and I'll be out there sort of looking at things, and the parents and the adults would be in the shelter, and they'd be shouting at me to sort of come back into the shelter. But being a kid, you're just fascinated by all this, the noise and the the commotion, and the action, so to speak, and you don't realize the consequences if anything goes wrong.
No, precisely, you don't think, and that's a blessing for children. You were lucky that you were excited about it. You were an adventurous seeker, obviously. My sister to this day dislikes fireworks and the loud noises of fireworks, for example. They remind her too much of the missiles and the bombs and the shootings and everything else. So it's
Is she an older sister?
Affects us differently. No, she's younger, 4.5 years younger. But she remembers clearly. She remembers more than I do. So she obviously kind of allowed herself to feel it at the time. She remembers it, whereas I was obviously kind of in total denial of what was going on. not sensing anything, and therefore kind of, pushing everything down and forgetting all about it. Tomorrow is another day, and life back to normal, really.
Well, being the older children, we tend to kind of grow up a bit quicker than the younger ones, and then the younger ones
Definitely.
take a bit more time for them to grow up because they've got someone grown up already, so they can stay in their childlike state. And we had,
Yes, there's that pressure on us.
Yeah, to sort of step up and be the new parents, which is good for the parents, because then they can, they don't have to bring up the child, really, because we do the bringing up for them.
There's an element of truth to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I've got an older sister, so really, when I look at my character and all of my idiosyncrasies and ups and downs and so on, and I look at my sister, it's pretty much the same. So she taught me well, so to speak. And then I guess I've got a younger sister, and I kind of passed it on to her. And then I've got a younger brother who's kind of he's still a bit of a child. He won't like me saying these things if he listens to it. And then I got another 2 brothers as well. So I got 3 brothers younger than me. I try not to teach them anything, really. Just I'm too old for it, teaching them.
Yeah, that's interesting, that relationship, isn't it? It's recently that I've kind of investigated a little bit more into the dynamics of the relationship between my sister and I. And as you say, I kind of stepped up in the capacity of a caregiver for her, because I actually grew up with a nanny. So my mom went back to work when I was 40 days old. And as a result, I grew up with a nanny who then got married and left when I was 7. And my sister would have been just about 4 and a bit. Okay. And at the time, or 3.5 actually, she would have been. At the time, we had long summer holidays, and mom and dad worked throughout the year. So the 3 months of the summer, I'd be home looking after my sister also. And very quickly, obviously, kind of I stepped up into the caregiver role. And as a result, we have a very different relationship now, but at the time, I think it was very much like a mother and child relationship, that she would feel very safe in my company. She says things that I don't remember. For example, she said, "Do you remember you taught me this, that, and the other?" No, I have no recollection of that. "Do you remember I was scared one night when there was thunder and lightning happening? I came to your room and you were explaining how thunder and lightning were." No, I don't remember that. And then because of that and the sense of responsibility perhaps that I had towards her, I have kind of all along, as we've grown up alongside each other, kind of felt that sense of responsibility towards her. And I think to a certain extent that's taken that kind of self-leadership away from her. And that's a really interesting thing that I've recently come to kind of realize. And I say, for you, it would have been very difficult, I guess, when I was constantly kind of saying to you, this is how you should be, this is what you should be doing. And we're very, very different beings anyway. So what serves me doesn't at all serve her. And for her to want to kind of live in almost my shadow has been quite difficult. And now I kind of realized that that relationship was because I was in the role of a caregiver for her. And it wasn't difficult for me. It wasn't easy for me, and it wasn't easy for her. It was difficult for both of us, really, when you think about it. But awareness is everything, isn't it? Now that we have an awareness of it, we can work through it and make it better. Not that our relationship isn't great. It's always been great. We're best of friends. She's my rock, actually. She's my #1 supporter and my rock. But that kind of the nature of the relationship is shifting as we're growing older. It's more on an equal footing rather than me being the caregiver.
Yeah. Is that because she's stepped up, so to speak, or have you stepped down a bit? Yeah.
Both. I think both. I think both of us have realized what was going on, because, and I'm very open and honest with her when I kind of come to these realizations and say, "Oh, I have a response to what's been happening. I think that this is what's happening, or that's what's been happening." And she says, "Yeah, I think so too." So yeah, it's a different relationship that we have together, which is much more equal and much more grown up and adult, really.
Yeah, yeah. And then you came here to the UK, and you found yourself in a caregiving role as well.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so, because we were going to the same school. My English was better than hers, and I felt responsible again at break times to check up on her, make sure she was fine, make sure that we were catching 2 buses to get to school, make sure that, you know, we got up on time and got ourselves ready and gone up back to school. It was, again, I think that part was quite tough, because for me, I was adjusting myself, so it was really tough to adjust to a different culture altogether. And I was doing my GCSEs as I was learning English. So that part of it was quite tough too. So to have that sense of responsibility for her was unkind, I think. But we don't know what we don't know, right? I didn't know it at the time.
And what was your kind of bedrock or sort of thing that gave you support and solace and relief at the time?
My own resilience, just studying.
Right.
Just studying. I had one mission. I had realized what a huge sacrifice my mom and dad made to come here. They didn't need to. Okay. They only came here to give us a better chance of education. So I had that huge sense of responsibility that I should perform well. And the whole purpose of us being here was so that I could study and go to university and get a job and tick all the boxes that the society expects us to tick. And I didn't disappoint. I did all of those. So for me, number one mission was to learn English, pass exams, and get myself a secure job.
So used to this kind of constant pressure on you, and you probably thrived in this pressure.
Thrive. What does thrive mean? I thrived as in I succeeded.
Yeah.
Again, the success that the society defines for us, but I wasn't thriving. I was actually slowly dying inside, I think.
And you know, when you say society, you mean more about the sort of parents?
No, I think that it is the society.
All right.
It's
so it was a UK society as well.
at large. No, it's our world. I mean, Iran society is actually more pressured when it comes to education. So, you know, I come from a background of females being educated as well as the males. So my grandmother left her 3 children at a time and then had another one later with nannies, and went to university and, you know, got her master's, and she was a headmistress until, you know, she retired. So she was very driven. And then as a result, the girls in the family were, you know, expected to study as well as the boys. And of course, because it was a privilege that didn't come easy, they, you know, valued it even more. So I think I grew up thinking that there was no option but to go to university and study. It was like there were no other options available. That was the only choice that I had. So when you talk about thrive, of course, I ticked a lot of boxes and I looked extremely successful from the external person's point of view, but I was not happy in myself.
And when did you sort of realize that fully, and you thought to yourself, do you know what, this is, you know, this is not for me anymore. I'm going to have a bit of a personal revolution here.
Personal revolution, that's exactly what I had. I guess my kind of sliding door moment, I call this the sliding door moment. My sliding door moment came when I kind of had my child really late in life. I was 36 when I had Harry.
What? You look about 26 now. What are you talking about? You're going back in time, is it?
I have a great plastic surgeon, obviously.
Time machine.
I was 36 when I had him, and that was the first time I took time out of life and work, literally, to care for this beautiful being. And that was the first time I actually let myself be. And I almost grew up with him, I think, you know. I was a child with him and I grew up with him. I went back to having fun, you know, dancing, singing, doing things that I never did as a child. And then I kind of fell in love with personal development as a result of actually having some time on my hands to do what I wanted to do, because I was awfully high achieving before that. Not only I had my job, which was very demanding, right at the start of my job, I used to do 24-hour shifts, so really, really demanding. But I was also building a portfolio of properties alongside that, because my job never rocked my boat. It was never satisfying for me.
This is an NHS job. This is a sort of senior managerial NHS job.
No, I wasn't. I never got to the managerial role because it wasn't for me. I never fitted the kind of the boxes of being an NHS manager, because I wasn't a yes person. So I couldn't do that. No, I was clinically high up. So I got to the top of my career with my clinical backgrounds. I'm a radiographer. I specialized in MRI, and then I got my reporting degree in MRI, also my kind of almost master's. I didn't actually sit the final exam because there was no point, because it wasn't supported in the trust that I studied it. They wouldn't allow me to report, but I went through the motions and actually got my reporting postgrad certificate. And
then, you probably like sort of looked at reports and you think to yourself, no, that's a load of rubbish. And then you go to the doctor and say, look, didn't you see this here? Didn't you see that here?
Exactly.
And then they're like, oh yeah, you're right, actually, I didn't notice that. And you think to yourself, here's me telling the radiologist their job. And
because all the radiologists were reporting MRIs, but some of them weren't MR trained, and my reports were certainly better than theirs. So there's no doubt about it, because I had to pass with 99% specificity and accuracy. So I had to be that much better, because it's a role extension. With role extensions, you have to be way better than the person who's kind of working in that capacity, but not a specialist, so specialist MR radiologists are definitely.
And was there some kind of sexism there and sort of racism there involved, or looking back?
Always racism, but I never let it in, because I'm quite a strong personality, and I saw it for what it was, and I was like, you're well and truly within your right not to like me because I'm different, but it's your loss. So I never kind of let it in, but definitely racism all throughout my schooling and my university and my work, regardless.
So you didn't use that badge, you just sort of brushed it away and just carried on and just got better and stronger and more resilient.
Because for every person who didn't like me, there were hundreds who did like me. So I kind of chose to associate with the ones that did rather than with the ones that didn't. So we always have this thing, don't we, that I know our subconscious is leading us always to kind of pay attention to the negative and dismiss the positive, because we're like that, aren't we? Otherwise we wouldn't have survived millions of years ago. But however, I kind of I loved what I was doing clinically, and I loved building my relationships. So I just built the relationships with the ones that liked me and forgot about the ones who didn't. But for me, I think this whole kind of personal revolution journey, as you were asking, came when I started personal development, and then realized that I hadn't really kind of had a path of my own in mind. I had kind of traveled down somebody else's path. Okay, I was never pushed, so this isn't a suggestion that there was any push or whatsoever. It was that expectation. And this is a really interesting thing. I don't know, I'm curious to find out what your thoughts are. I don't know whether it's really the expectations that are driving us that way, or is it because we think the expectations are there? So if I was to have an open conversation with my parents, for example, not that I knew what an open conversation was like back then, but if I was to have an open conversation with them and say, look, this isn't my path, I want to do something else, I'm sure they would have been open to it. I'm sure they wouldn't have said no. But I didn't even realize I had that choice.
I mean, it boils down to essentially the known and the unknown. So it was unknown to you at that period of time, and then you're exposed to that part of the unknown that became known to you, and then it became a different paradigm for you.
Totally. It was like,
and it sort of
shift, like a
you know,
complete shift.
you sort of realize that there is another world out there which you haven't experienced, which is scary, and you know, it creates a lot of anxiety. Yeah, you know, sort of it does create that sort of uneasiness. But once that subsides, you start walking out into the unknown, and it becomes more known, and then it's a new page for your journey in life.
Absolutely, it's a totally new chapter. Totally new chapter. Yes, it's almost as if you die and you're reborn again. You know,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of, you know, the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell talks about. It literally is like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. And you know, it is
death.
about the journey, and it is about
It
the
is about,
you know, the hero's journey. You know, whether it's a refugee female hero's journey or sort of anyone else. Who were the kind of figures at that time that really got you excited about personal development when you first started?
Ordinary people. First of all, it was the ordinary people, because the books were like, you know, the authors were just these kind of famous beings that I would never have any face-to-face contact with. They were kind of people that you might possibly put on kind of pedestals, you know. So the people who really changed my perspective were the ordinary people I was meeting, who had beautiful stories. So I always joke that, you know, but it's not a joke, it's real, that I became an explorer when I was really kind of thinking there is another way to be. I'm sure, but I just don't know what it is. It's like the status quo is no longer serving me. It's just not good enough, but I don't know what to do. I keep thinking, I have no idea what I can do, because this is all I've ever done. So I decided to become an explorer. And another sliding door moment was like when I was supposed to go to this forum, personal development forum, with a friend, because I didn't want to walk into this place by myself. And my friend phoned in sick that morning. And this was in Excel in London. I was going to. She said she couldn't come. Then I went online to book my train ticket, and there were no trains running. There were only buses to London, because there was engineering work on the road. So it was like, you know, you can't go. And I'm like, I'm going to go because I've committed to this. This is a day out for me, because Harry was about 5 at the time. I was like looking forward to a day out. So I just got out by myself, and I drove there actually, and parked in some nearby car park, and then kind of, you know, got myself there. And it was the best thing I ever did. It was that day that actually changed the trajectory of my life, because
What happened?
I realized, you know, the entrepreneurs that I saw, the business people I spoke to, had a very, very different mindset, a very different approach to the professionals I was used to speaking to. They all had a story. They weren't afraid of sharing their story. They weren't afraid of sharing the stories of their failures. Whereas, you know that, and I know that from a medical background, everybody wants to talk about their wins. Nobody is brave enough to talk about their failures. We don't want to talk about our failures, because we're, you know, we don't fail, we only win. And it was just so refreshing to speak to people, and they didn't know me from Adam, but they were willing to share their stories with me. I thought, oh my God, this is just a revelation. That was the start of me falling in love with events like that, and just registering for every single one that was going. Lots of networking meetings, personal development forums. So I kind of drowned myself in that for years before I found my ikigai. I got myself a coach. Meeting my coach was another kind of sliding door moment, because if I hadn't then nurtured that relationship to get more out of him, I wouldn't be where I am. So it's like, you know, all there are opportunities, I think, when we are, so, you know, that's the framework I work within, is the framework of kind of, you know, values, identity, and purpose. I call it the VIP. When you know your VIP, when you know who you are, when you know what you love doing, the direction of travel is very, very clear. You know exactly what you're looking for, and that's how you start seeing opportunities. So I actually started seeing opportunities that might have been there before, but I would have been blinded to them. And not only I was seeing the opportunities, I was actually taking steps towards nurturing those relationships, and not only building them, but then nurturing them. So every kind of 6 months these shows were on, I would go back and see the exhibitors and the people that I had made relationships before, just to say hi and then I have a coffee and hang around with them. And that's how you put yourself in an environment where you are kind of aiming to be like the people that live in that environment. So changing your environment is very, very important when you are trying to be somebody else, do something else new. So this process of change is deemed to be very difficult by people, because people don't expect to do anything different. They expect themselves to just stay as they are and change to happen. And it's just not like that. You need to be very proactive in taking steps towards change. And when you know what it is you want, that becomes easy, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you've got to put yourself in a different society, so to speak, in order to change. Now, what was the first story of failure you shared with people?
My story of failure.
Yeah.
I have so many. Which one?
Like, the first event where you sat down and you thought, do you know what, this is the first time I'm going to talk about my celebration of failure.
Okay, the entrepreneurs I was meeting, you mean that very first time I met them, or generally?
Well, yeah, up to you really,
Okay, so the stories of failure I was discussing with them were how my kind of, my 20, almost, it was about 22 years of career, I wasn't enjoying it anymore, okay, because I didn't feel that I belonged anymore. So to me, that was a huge failure, because I thought it was my fault. At the time, I thought it was me, and that's the reason I didn't belong. I didn't realize that it was the culture of the work that was not valuing my unique perspectives. And that's the reason I felt I didn't belong. And, I think my biggest source of dissatisfaction with work was because I didn't matter, and we want to matter, right? I didn't feel visible. I felt that I had given a lot of my life to this profession, and all of a sudden I was invisible. I wasn't, I didn't matter. I wasn't valuable to them. And that hurt quite a lot. So that's the kind of story of failure that I had. I remember clearly being offered a secondment role, and then I was told that I had misunderstood and there was no such role. And I was like, I didn't misunderstand. English is my second language, but we definitely shook on this. I was offered a secondment role. And then when I kind of discussed it with somebody else, with our clinical director at the time, he said that the budget had been withdrawn, for example, and they couldn't second you. And I just thought, well, had I been told that, I would have understood. I would have been disappointed, but I would have understood. However, being told I was mistaken was what bothered me, because I'm not stupid, why would you treat somebody like that? So I didn't like the way I was being treated in a sense, and then the process of interviews came forward, and I didn't want to apply for the role because, as I said, I didn't think I fitted that management kind of criteria, but I was asked to apply for the role by, again, the said person, because he said, I want to work with you. Apply for the role. I really want to work with you. I applied and I didn't even get an interview. So that was, again, another sliding door moment for me. It was like, kind of need to leave now. It's not even funny anymore. It's like, I really, really don't belong. And I think that lack of belonging prompted me to step up the search and just leave. Other failure stories, I have many. I've set up so many businesses, and I've succeeded at some and failed at some. I set up a hampering business years and years and years ago, because again, years ago I was desperate to get out, but never did anything about it. And the environment that we're in is ever so important in the changes that we implement or not. And so back, before Harry was even a thing, would have been about nearly 20 years ago, actually. I was really unhappy with my job. Even back then, I was really unhappy with my job. But my then husband was like, no, don't leave, do something else along the side. And I remember I went to oil and vinegar in our town center. It was a really new shop. I don't know if you ever had a shop like that nearby. It was really gorgeous. It just sold oils and vinegars, and this guy was selling his business, obviously because it was failing, but I had no sense of what business was like back then. And I remember I went with a friend, and he just said in a conversation he was selling, was like, I want to buy it, I love this place, I want to run it, da, da, da. And I came home and I said to my husband, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to get out of the NHS. And it's like, why don't you have your own hampering business? Don't buy that. I thought, okay, I'll do that. So I went and set up a hampering business, which obviously I didn't know anything about. So I kind of spent a ton of money buying stuff, and then know how to sell, really. So I hate selling. So that kind of went by. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that I love what I do now, and it's a very different thing to what I used to do. But just because this one's successful doesn't mean that is the first thing I've tried, right? Yeah. I've tried so many other things that have failed before. I became an estate planner, for example, because I was so desperate to get out. And I thought, right, I'm in a caring business, I'm going to become an estate planner, because estate planners are carers also. And then that was, again, for me, it was that element of selling. I had to then go out and sell, and I hated to sell, right? So that kind of failed also. There are lots and lots of failure stories. And it's good to share them, because I think it gives people that kind of convincer that, people try different things, and you might like it and you might not, Yeah. You just never know what you're going to fit into and what you're not.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so many opportunities for failure out there. It's sort of never ending. Yeah. And we rarely succeed in anything, really.
We do. I'd like to challenge that. We do succeed. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We do succeed. It's just defining what success means, I think, is one thing, isn't it? Define what success means to you.
Oh, are you asking me what success
not
is?
Particularly. No, I'm just.
No, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure what success is.
Success?
I think yeah, I mean, it's sort of it depends on the context, really. For some people, success is getting out of bed and making a cup of tea, so it is contextual. But as you said, we are more tuned to failures and hurt and sort of pain than we are to happiness and successes, because it makes us survive a lot longer. And
it doesn't, though. It doesn't, because it kind of causes deep unhappiness when we look at life like that. So
I don't think too much.
Changing the story. It's changing the story. For me, it's all about the story. It starts with a story, it ends with a story. What's your story? What's the story you're telling yourself? And how can you tell a different story so that you perceive the thing you're looking at differently?
I mean, the reason why I have that story is because I grew up with this sort of notion that you can't be arrogant and you can't have a big ego, and you got to be humble. So for me, success is that sort of danger area, because if I get too successful, I'll get too ahead of myself and I get a big ego and I can't be humble anymore. So
X means Y, right? If you are successful, that means you've got a big ego.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you see how that's not you thinking, really? You've kind of adopted that thought, haven't you?
Yeah.
You've adopted that. Is like patterns that we adopt, both in our bodies and in our thoughts of what things mean. But it doesn't necessarily mean that. I mean, name me a successful person. Do they have a big ego?
What was that?
Name me a successful person. Who do you deem to be successful, for example?
Who do I deem to be successful? I think my son's been successful. He's done quite well. No, he's all right, actually. Yeah, he's pretty good. Yeah.
I rest my case. It's just, we are brought up with these kind of, limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
And
I think I'm successful, actually. I think
Yeah.
I think I'm
Yeah.
successful. But I know my ego to a certain extent, in the sense that I know when I start stepping into the the arrogant sphere for me. So I'm still a bit sensitive to that, because I realize it when I see other people being in that arrogant sphere. I my kind of sixth sense switches on, and I think, oh, there's an arrogant person here. And I can't really explain why that happens, because there's a lot of things that we can't verbally explain things. It's like a second sense, or a sixth sense, as they say. Do you
Yeah.
believe in that?
Yeah.
And the sixth
Sixth
sense?
sense, definitely. Intuition. Again, I silenced my intuition for years and years and years. I'm quite intuitive, but I silenced it for years, and hence all my kind of chronic pain issues. I had chronic shoulder back pain, neck pain. I was, constantly in and out of chiropractor clinic. And I think the second I kind of realized what the problem was, and I stopped living that way and chose a different path, that literally kind of overnight disappeared. So I do believe in intuition. When we do act according to our intuition, our sixth sense, call it whatever you want to call it, the kind of, the patterns that we hold in our body, again, the messages that our body send us when we're thinking about something. Our body has a certain intelligence that we don't give the credit to. So we are such head thinkers, and if we just stop thinking for a few moments and paid attention to the messages that we're sent by our body, we would do much better.
How can we grow that? I mean, how can we make it more
awareness?
Okay.
Being aware. For me, awareness is everything, right? Awareness gives us choice. When we are aware of whatever that's happening in our body, in our head, then we have a choice of what to do with it. Okay. So for example, I've got this kind of, awareness that this kind of behavior may lead to this kind of sensation in my body, right? And then I have a choice whether or not to go ahead with it. All right. And I think when we understand that we have a choice all the time, we then have a sense of kind of self-efficacy, that we are capable, we can do things our way. And when that happens, you kind of get this self-leadership that you've never known before. So it's something that when you get, you cannot have taken away from you. And I think that's the biggest gift, that kind of idea that we are 100% in charge of our own destinies, regardless of what's happening out there, regardless of all the circumstances. We get to choose all the time.
And where does society fit into this? Because there's there's a big as Freud would say, a superego, which is the society and the culture that influences you and influences your choices.
Again, understand what the influences are and decide whether or not you want to take them on. Yeah.
Okay. So,
So
where do you want to step out of society and step out of the cultural and social norms?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. If you know exactly what serves you and what your tendencies are. For me, understanding tendencies is really important. That's again another way that I work with my clients, is helping them understand what their motivations are, what their attitudes are. And those motivations and attitudes are very much linked to the belief system that we have, which is, again, we've inherited from our ancestors, from our kind of places that we've grown up in, the society we exist within. So when we understand that, then again we have a choice of how to be. Okay. And if you imagine that each kind of motivation that we have, each kind of thing that you can define on that motivation spectrum, we fall somewhere within a continuum. And again, learning to be flexible, learning to dial that up and down as and when we need to is really important. And that's how we actually impact and influence others, right? By stepping into their world, understanding the world as they do, and then kind of leading them one way or another. Yeah, so we can dial it up and down as and when we want to. For example, you know, if I'm working with you in the same office and you are extremely tidy and you're very detailed, and I'm just all over the place because I'm this great conceptual person and I create big kind of, you know, big visions, and I'm really messy because I'm really creative and da 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 da. If we are to survive together successfully, if we understand each other's tendencies, then it's much easier for us to kind of step inside each other's worlds rather, you know, step into your world and think, oh, he's a bit detailed, so maybe I should actually tone down the big pictureness and just speak a few more details, right? And when you're talking to me, you might think, I'm going to bore her to death if I talk about the detail. I'm just going to kind of, you know, make her lose interest. Perhaps I need to be more succinct in the way I communicate with her. If we were both to understand each other's opposing tendencies and slid on that line just a little bit closer together as and when it was necessary, that would be, you know, such a great conflict resolution tool.
So, you know, one thing is understanding oneself. The other thing is understanding the other. And the third thing is this flexibility that you can develop in order to come together with the other person or entity. How can we develop this flexibility in oneself to, you know, to allow us to
awareness? I think for me it's awareness and being curious. Okay, it's first having that awareness ourselves of what we are. Okay, understanding self, as you say, it starts with us. We cannot change anybody else, right? But we can change us. We can't go and change the world. We can't go and change the circumstances, right? But we can change ourselves, right? So understanding myself, and then when I totally understand myself, and if I'm not getting on with you, I might wonder, what leads me not to get on with Haidar so much? What is it? What is it that's we're kind of butting heads on, right? And if I'm curious and if I'm kind of standing back, trying to understand the perspective, I might actually ask you a few questions. And, you know, find out a little bit more. Maybe I would offer you, ask other people how you're perceived, because we don't know how we're perceived at all. So a little bit of exploratory exercises that we would engage in to actually understand ourselves and each other better. And then if we wanted to have a better relationship, we would have to be more flexible and kind of, you know, we don't have to. I don't have to be as detailed as you all the time, and you don't have to be as big picture as me all the time. Okay. Yeah. But if we wanted to, again, choicefulness, right? We have a choice to step a little bit closer together when we're working together. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit like a dance, isn't it? I mean, you know, the first few dances are a bit rough and sort of not very flowing, and then after a bit, you start understanding the other person's micro movements and idiosyncrasies, and you know the ways that they move and think and talk and so on, and it does get better with time. But as you said, once you kind of dissociate yourself from the automatic thinking and the automatic habits and behaviors you have in your head, and you know, be more aware of them and how you interact in society and with these other, you know, other individuals, you start learning about yourself as well. And you know, you're probably a fan of all this stuff being taught in schools and sort of at, you know, at an early age.
If I could run
so you know,
the
poor
world,
Harry's getting you know,
Harry's
tons of
Harry's coaching me these days, actually.
Oh really? Why? What have you done?
Every so often he'll just pose this question like, oh, that was a brilliant question, well done you. And thank you, because actually when somebody asks those questions of you, you think, even if it's your 12-year-old son, no, they just make you think. It's amazing.
What did he ask
I love
you?
it. it was just a really simple thing. It was just really not relevant. I was going to a networking event the other day. It was lovely. The sun was shining, but I knew it would be cold. I'm like, oh, I don't know what to wear. What shall I wear? And he said, I don't know. What do you want to wear? I don't know. I don't know where, whether to wear a dress because it's sunny, or will it be cold? Shall I wear a pair of trousers or something? And he says, Mommy, if you knew, what would you wear? And I thought, okay. That's a really good question. If I knew, I don't know. Let me think about it one more time. Okay, I've decided. So it's kind of, asking questions that, rather than answering me. When I'm asking you, what do you think I should wear? He doesn't immediately fall into the response mode.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that's really powerful when you're met with questions that make you think, right? I think it's really, really important to teach this at schools, because if we are to reduce the area of conflict, if we are to understand each other, diversity and inclusion is something that everybody's rolling out as a training mechanism. And I get from my friends that work in large institutes that sometimes it's just a transmit only training that they're getting, and they're left quite frustrated. So I think this is our chance actually to teach these skills to everybody. So it's about meeting each other halfway, and it's about understanding ourselves and others fully, understanding that in each of us there is a uniqueness that needs to be celebrated. And unfortunately, most people don't even know what that uniqueness in them is. So if we're not aware of our superpower, how can we be aware of somebody else's, right? So it's this kind of thing that we need to work with in order to, one, accept ourselves as we are, and understand that we are limited in what we can do, but we can learn. Okay, it's that process of learning, moving always towards the unknown. And also how to communicate better and to resolve the conflicts at work, because we are capable of understanding different perspectives. It's about perspective seeking also, isn't it? Rather than know that we're right all the time, and I'm not interested in your opinion because I'm your senior and my superior, and therefore there's no room for you to sit around the table. You're my deputy, but I'm not going to forward you any emails because I don't want to share anything with you. All right. So all of those things are what I'm used to, what are my experiences, and it just causes that exclusive, environment rather than inclusive environment where we should feel that we belong in. Yeah. They're, very, very human things. They're very human things to do. It's just that there's so much, I think it's the scarcity mindset, it's the fear also that's stopping people being totally honest and open. So we have a lot of work to do, I believe, in some organizations, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that the cat is out of the bag, so to speak, that we're allowed to have that space to have this conversation. And it is a difficult conversation. It's not something that, it's not a bed of roses, it's a bed of thorns to start off with. And a lot of people are going to get hurt because it's a new paradigm for them. It's the new unknown, so to speak. But we've got to be brave, and we've got to step forward. And I was
without conversations, we won't get anywhere. You're right. And they're not easy conversations to be had. But again, when we come from the direction of total no blame, no shame, no judgment kind of conversation, I'm only trying to understand you, okay? I am not a male. I don't know what it's like to be a male. I don't know what it's like to be a dad. So I can't tell you that I feel you, but can you tell me a little bit about what that feels like?
Yeah.
Okay, so again, saying, I don't know, tell me. All right. I don't know what being from Baghdad is like. Can you tell me a little bit about it, please, rather than just shy away from it? And that just opens up the line of conversation and communication, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And then when we talk, I actually realized, gosh, we're from different countries altogether, but we're quite alike, actually.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, what's great is that you've sort of moved so much since you know, since coming from the Middle East, and you've learned so much, and you know, there's more to come, so to speak.
There's always more to come.
Yeah, there's always more to come. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you know, we've got to wrap up fairly soon. So, I mean, I like to ask these questions sort of at the end. And so, what are your 3 top tips to Vafa, who is, you know, about to, you know, just finished, you know, the sort of the A levels, going into the NHS, you know, finish your degree, you're about to start your clinical work in the NHS. You know, what would you tell Vafa that, you know, what are your 3 top tips to her? You know, because there's quite a few people from the NHS who listen to this, and you know, the NHS is pretty difficult at the moment. You know, with the you know, with the demands and COVID, and you know, the media and everything else that goes on, politics. What would you tell them? A woman that's sort of gone through it and sort of out the other side.
Is this rocking your boat? That's the first question for me. Okay. Is this rocking your boat? Because if it's not, what are the consequences? What is the pain that you're sensing in your body every time you go to work? Because I sensed it. I know what it's like, that constant gut ache where I had to step outside of my values and do something that I didn't agree with. So for me, it's about doing a real good audit of what you love doing, okay, what your values are and where are they conflicting with your current life. For me, it's about doing an audit of your strengths. Okay, what is your superpower? Understand your uniqueness. All of us have a certain uniqueness that is valuable to the place of work that we go to. What is yours and how is it being celebrated? Is it actually being celebrated or is it being violated? Okay, for me, everything that was suggested to be my weakness is actually my strength in my current role, which is something that I love doing. I get up excited about every single day. And when you find out what you really love doing and what your uniqueness is accepting yourself as you are exactly, without any sense of blame, shame, and judgment, and be unapologetic about how you show up, because that's when you are your true self, when you're your true authentic self, and kind of act from a place of love rather than a place of duty, because duty sometimes leads us to resent the actions that we take. Whereas when we operate from a place of love, we just give and we're energized by it. We're not depleted. And unfortunately, we see the burnout, the level of burnout. And I've been there. I was there 3 times, 3 burnouts finally got me out of the NHS on the 3rd one. When you give from a place of love, you're not likely to burn out. Okay, because you know your boundaries, you know when enough is enough. You just step back and give yourself time to recover, because that's something that I never did. I worked very hard to serve others, my team, at my own detriment. So I'm very, very familiar with that. So they're the top tips, really. Understand that you have a choice. There's always a choice, right? You have a choice to say yes, you have a choice to say no. And for me, it's boundaries. The people I work with, mostly I teach them boundaries. It's like, you know, what do you want to say yes to? What do you want to say no to? What should you say yes to more in order to say no to the things that don't serve you, and vice versa? So those are really, really important points to bear in mind. Choicefulness, boundaries, loving yourself as you are.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's been great listening to you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you move forward into other realms of the unknown. You know, that's going to be interesting to see where you get to.
Yeah. I think the best thing for me is like I'm living the life that I wanted, and I think, you know, the moment you choose to live the life that you want is a different kind of life. Literally, it doesn't mean that there are no difficulties, no challenges, but it just means that you are much more resilient in the way that you deal with them. So
Yeah, and it's more interesting and, you know, more curious, as you said.
yeah.
You know, curiosity is there, and it probably doesn't kill the cat, you know.
No, it strengthens the cat. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a
You're
pleasure
welcome.
speaking with you.
Thank you. Take care of yourself.
And you.